Alright, so these are my chapter 5 and 6 notes. So it started off talking about classification, and that was really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that in math. Just to help integrate math into different content areas, and I really like the part about like having a discussion with it, reminding me of the math talk, allowing students to kind of sort out something, and then you discuss like similarities they saw and some differences. You could do some different activities within that discussion of having them make post-its and maybe filling out a T-chart to compare. And then it went on to patterns, which working in the first grade room, I really made a connection with this because we talked a lot about patterns, especially using like the 100s chart, which it talks about in chapter 6. And you kind of just like allow students to look at the chart and like kind of think, oh, that's interesting, like this column all has the same number in the one spot, and like letting them see those patterns within things. And like you could do this with books. In our music class, we're talking about like an add-on book, and you can see the pattern within that. I'd never heard of the difference between route counting and rational counting, and to me rational counting was more you had a deeper understanding of it and you really were thinking about it instead of just reading off the numbers. And then progressing in their counting abilities, that was pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of the farther you go, the more complex things you can start to do. Then it talked about representing numbers, which I thought was important because you're going to see, we want to relate math back to the real world, and they're going to see numbers represented in all sorts of different ways in the real world, so we want them to be able to understand different graphs and numerals and all the different ways that numbers can be represented. Number sense, that's really just having a deep understanding of what numbers mean and how they work in the world. And then this is a 10 frame. I've seen them used in many different ways, such as I've seen my first grade teacher use them for getting students to understand like the 10 value, like place 10, that once you fill up a whole 10 chart you have to move on to the next one, and so that means you have one full 10. And then estimation, you need to teach about making good estimates, and then you kind of start with smaller quantities and you grow those as the students get older. And then we have the 6 stages of place development starting in chapter 6, which all just really grew on each other and understanding more as they went, just starting with the basics that 28 is a whole number, and then 54 is 5 tens and 4 ones, and moving on from there. And then it talks about grouping activities, which provides a foundational experience for place value development, and then materials you could use to teach place value. I liked using manipulatives to assess students' knowledge of place value. I think it creates a concrete example of where your students are at and if they're understanding it or not, and you can see it right there and all the students can participate instead of just calling on like a couple students to see how they're doing. I've seen hundreds charts used for a lot of things like I talked about earlier, like patterns, and there's so much you can do with those. And then rounding and estimating, what I gathered is more that rounding, you kind of have a predetermined number and they want you to then round to the nearest 10, 100, or something. And then with estimating, it's more of an educated guess before you do any math about what the answer will be. So those are my notes for chapter 5 and 6.